Hey YouTube, today I'm going to be reacting to some Reddit comments. Ooh, this should be good. Let's hear AOC critiquing the DNC and then let's read the comments.
Biden on his way
We're in Fluent in Finance, which is actually sort of a lefty sub.
out. It was only on his way out that he was like, this country's controlled by oligarchs. Bye. Like, we could have used that energy a couple years ago. We're supposed to act like money doesn't only
Well, maybe you shouldn't have nominated somebody with dementia then.
corrupts Republicans. Give me a fucking break. You ask.
Okay, solid point from AOC. Give the devil the due. Absolutely. Both the Democrat and the Republican Party are corrupt as hell. I agree with you.
A working class American or just any normal American, what is a Democrat? What do they stand for? They will not really be able to give you a clear answer. And so our party needs
It's Jon Stewart.
a clear and strong agenda. I think one of the problems is that the internal incentives within the Democratic Party are quite contrary to a clear, full-throated agenda. An hour is nothing. This was the demand 10 years ago. To be
Oh no.
honest, when you index it, it should be higher now.
No. Oh my God, no. The minimum wage is a horrible policy. It's like my, what do you call that? When you have like an issue? I don't know. Anyway, the minimum wage just prices low skilled workers out of the marketplace. It doesn't raise people's wages when you increase the minimum wage. It's just a very bad policy. I hate the minimum wage. Yeah.
And
No, absolutely. I mean, like you already have states with their own minimum wages. If you're a minimum wage advocate, why isn't that enough for you? Why do you have to force, the whole country to follow the same playbook instead of at least leaving it to the states, like they do?
it,
Actually, I think it's great that it's been so long since the federal minimum wage has been touched. And it's been since like Clinton that it's been meaningfully changed. And the result has been steadily decreasing unemployment. If you look at unemployment in America, vis-a-vis the last time the minimum wage was increased, and it's just been like a very slowly but steady decline down, except for, of course, the pandemic where there's this huge spike. But there's been like a clear downward trend. I mean, maybe there's some confounding factors there, but it seems pretty clear to me like people have a market wage, and by that I mean that's what their labor is worth, right? Like if you're a cook, a line chef, your labor might be worth $16, $17 an hour, and there'd be a bunch of restaurants willing to pay you that, but that's about what you would get. It might be 16, it might be 17, depending on factors, you know. Um, it could be 12 or 13 or 20, if you're for a different person. I'm saying for one specific person, based on how much experience they have, the skills they have, their educational background and training, they're going to have a market rate. Okay. And so if somebody's market rate is only $7 an hour, that's what their skills are basically worth, then you set the minimum wage at $15 an hour and they can't get a job. Nobody's going to hire them. And that's a huge problem. It's a huge problem for low skilled workers.
it is nothing.
Okay, now let's check out the comments. Wish we could have just voted for her or Bernie. Oh, dear me, no. I mean, Bernie Sanders is basically a communist. He was a socialist when he was a senator. That was like what he identified as. That was his political party, socialist. I mean, he got kicked out of a hippie commune because he was too lazy and he wanted to do the dishes. And he's a huge hypocrite. He's a millionaire. He owns multiple vacation homes. I mean, Bernie Sanders would have been a horrible president. It would have been FDR all over again. And look at these people. Her and Bernie would have been a dream ticket, more like a nightmare.
Biden on his
A
way
nightmare
out
ticket.
is
We don't want to hear any more out of you, AOC. You already said your piece. And look at all these upvotes. Oh my God. If only they were a little closer in age, but at least, if not on the same ticket, I hope she carries on. Sometimes we aren't lucky enough to have two people like that at once. Oh my God, these people are so brainwashed. AOC is not a good politician. These leftists, they're in favor of the worst policies. They're all about wealth redistribution, stealing people's money, basically. They want to institute socialized medicine, even though it's a terrible system. This guy here says the first sensible thing, a dream ticket that would be unelectable, which is true. I mean, you look historically, all the very far left and far right presidential candidates in American presidential history, like um, like George McGovern, or somebody on the right, like Goldwater, extremism in defense of liberty is no virtue. Both these guys got blown out, it wasn't even a close contest. It's all Obamas and Romneys. That's who wins elections. Moderates, centrists. Yeah, here we're getting some more. Now we're getting to the heart of it. This is why we keep losing. Pure undirected nativity. I think he means naivete. I don't think the DNC is having too many Christmas displays. Actually, there's an awful lot of these people. This bullshit is why Trump is president. Stop it. Just imagining that maybe here's another pro AOC Sanders person. Of course, the will to power within the Democratic Party is very strong. So all these extremists usually end up getting outvoted by the quote unquote saner voices. Oh, this is going to be awful too. Trump ends aid to Ukraine, which is a good thing. Okay. Yes, it was bad for Putin to invade Ukraine. Yes, Russia evil. Okay. But giving money, giving aid, military aid, weapons, equipment, loans, whatever, in order to fan the flames of that conflict is just causing unnecessary death and destruction. The important thing is that the war ends, and it really doesn't matter where the arbitrary line in the sand is drawn between Ukraine and Russia. Let's just have peace. And as expected, an idiotic comment got 1,000 upvotes. Why is everybody wringing their hand and bunching their skirts here? I'm not familiar with the bunching their skirts expression, I guess. It brings to mind the image of you're hopping over a puddle or something. I don't know. I guess it means the same thing as wringing your hands, which that's another one when you think about it. What the hell does that mean? Wringing their hands, you know? Why? It's got something to do with your hands, I guess. What do you like? I understand what the expression means, where you're like, oh no, this is so awful or whatever. I think that's what it means. Anyway, but I don't understand the etymology of the expression. Anyway, duh, that is expected. It was the plan. He fucking ran on this policy. No one should be surprised. Frankly, all our allies and our citizens need this slap in the face. Why is it a slap in the face? To understand who America is, well, that's not even, America is not a person. There's 300 plus million different Americans. They're all their own people. They're not one monolithic whole, you collectivist moron. The same way they understood it before World War II. When America was the most prosperous country in the world, where anybody could come and with a lifetime of hard work, they could amass an incredible fortune, like Andrew Carnegie, who came over to America as an impoverished Scotsman, like child. He was working in a factory for like 70 hours a day for 10 cents an hour, whatever mediocre wage, and he built a massive steel empire through sheer grit and determination and hard work and uh, being a self-educated man. We are shitty narcissists. Well, are you one person together, or are you all individuals that care only about ourselves and each individual aspires to be a king in his own right? So what? The Americans have grand aspirations, and that's a bad thing. You should be content to be some feudal peasant. You should know your place. What is he saying? Through immigration and policy, we have a reasonable base of sheep that are okay with a king. Through immigration and policy, what is he talking about? So there's no guardrails against someone achieving the goal. What is this guy going on about? Through immigration and policy, we have a reasonable base of sheep. Like, I don't think any of this really makes sense in a logical, coherent way. I have no idea what he's talking about anyway. Maybe I don't speak leftist or something. But actually, I don't think like the words really even matter to these people. He's throwing a few cuss words, say you're edgy, Trump bad, something fascist or king, monarch in this sense, in this instance. But still, same thing, really, like a dictator and a monarch, an absolute monarch, same thing. You give the basic leftist talking points, they'll be like, oh, I'll upvote that for sure. Goddamn yahoos. Now this guy coming in to say, Mom, did you know that actually, it's a great thing if the government gives all this money to the military industrial complex because the president of Lockheed Martin needs to eat too. And then he tries to walk it back because presumably he was called out by somebody who was not a moron. It's like, oh, I'm not trying to say it's a good thing. Oh, really? What, you were trying to say what? It was a bad thing that the money gets sent in America? Clearly implicit in your comments, it directly benefits American companies. I mean, clearly it is implicit in your comment that the aid money is like a good thing for America. When in reality, it's just a massive waste of resources and costing the lives of Ukrainians and Russians, destroying untold billions in wealth in Ukraine. If it weren't for American aid, Zelensky would have had to surrender long ago. The conflict would already be over. But America, the Biden administration, was used this crisis as a way to weaken their geopolitical rival. It was cynical realpolitik, just absolutely disgusting, really. Sacrificing innocent people, an entire country, for the sake of political power and geopolitical influence. And this guy's such a weasel, too. I'm not saying it's good or bad, he says. So he won't even commit to his position because he's a little weasel. But the counter argument is, he continues to make his real point, it's cheaper to fight a war with another country's soldier. And that's the point. They want to fight a war with Russia. And they want other people to do their dying for them. Yeah, this is going to be Trump versus military industrial complex behind the scenes. Who knows how it will end? Okay, this is a comment I like. Yes, that's exactly it. Conflict between the president and the military industrial complex. So maybe there's some redeeming voices here in Fluent in Finance. It hasn't been completely infested by leftist morons, but they're trying. They're trying hard, you can tell. And then this guy mentions JFK, and I guess suggesting that the military industrial complex had something to do with his death. Love a good conspiracy theory. That, and he wanted peace throughout the world. Oh my God, you're a moron. Yeah, JFK wanted peace throughout the world. That's why he went to war with Vietnam. Dingus. Oh, and here's a gold bug conspiracy theory. He also signed an EO to switch us back to the gold standard. I think it was the silver standard, actually. So it's not quite as juicy as that. Um, but basically, the EO designated to the Secretary of Treasury the power to issue silver certificates, which would be like a silver-backed dollar. Anyway, that only lasted like a year. Okay, this should be an interesting topic. Uh, Republican Earl L. Carter, nicknamed Buddy, wants to replace the income tax in the IRS with a national sales tax. I am ambivalent about a sales tax versus the income tax, so long as they are neutral, like they raise the same amount of revenue. I am not a big fan of the sales tax versus the income tax, but I'm sure these comments are going to be moronic. No, it has been tried and failed. They want to bring government back to the age of before the New Deal. I don't know about them, but I absolutely do. That is exactly what I want. So absolute help for everyone but the super wealthy, that's not accurate. That is just untrue. The New Deal was a massive mistake. I mean, just consider that prior to the New Deal, America had already gone to being the richest country in the world. Workers had higher wages in America than anywhere else in the entire world, even though it's a new country. The economy was growing extremely fast, and you had real money backed by gold. This was the ideal economic situation, and that's why America became such a dominant global power, because they were a nation founded upon liberty, and because laissez-faire had been the economic system up until the 20th century. So why, when you had so much success with laissez-faire, why would you abandon that situation, abandon that system, and adopt interventionism? It makes no sense. And you can tell how badly the New Deal failed right away, because right after they institute it, you have, and during, while it was instituted, you have the Great Depression. Literally the worst depression in the history of American economic history. The Great Depression. Unemployment was at 15% for the first 12 years of the Great Depression until the 40s. From 29, a whole decade of 15 and 20% unemployment. Why? Because Hoover and then FDR both tried to keep wages artificially high. And that's what happens when you set a price artificially high. You get an unsold surplus. In the labor market, that's known as unemployment. And that's why the economy was so lousy, because so many people were out of work. Plus the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which led to retaliatory tariffs from Europe, which was also suffering their own Great Depression. And then that devastated the agricultural sector. See, the problem is that when people look back at like the 1910, 1920s, or late 19th century and compare it with today, they compare it to absolute terms. They compare it in absolute terms. Well, it's been more than 100 years. Of course, things have gotten better. That doesn't mean the present system is better than the system that was in place then. If you look at the rate of progress, if you look at the rate of economic growth, the economy was growing much faster back then. And as I said, under laissez faire, America became the richest country in the world. They want slaves. That's just a baseless accusation. I mean, look at them. Look at how many private prisons there are. It's not actually that many private prisons. And really, it doesn't make a lot of difference if the federal government hires 100 people to staff and man a prison, a public prison, or if the federal government pays a company of 100 people to staff and man a private, quote unquote, private prison. Like, people blame private prisons for people being in jail, but they're not the judges that sentence the prisoners to prison. They're not the politicians that make the laws to determine whether people go to prison. And they always bring up the Cash for Kids judge, who, by the way, was pardoned by Joe Biden. I do agree, though, there's too many ridiculous laws, and you need reform of the legal system. You can start by legalizing drugs, and there's way too many laws on the books. And the reason for that is so bureaucrats can always lord their power over you. It's always at their discretion, and they always have something on you. But whenever people like this, they complain about the military prison complex or whatever, but they never really say, what they would legalize. Because the fact is, a lot of people in prison actually deserve it. Some don't. I'm glad that Ross Ulrich was let out of prison by Trump's pardon. The founder of Silk Road, the darknet marketplace, But like, people complain about the prison system or about states building prisons. They never say what crimes they want to legalize. They just complain about the problem without offering any solutions. It's only 8% of U.S. prisons that are private. Like, people make a big deal out of it, but it's just, it doesn't make much difference if they're private or public. We've got a bold mega supporter wading in to the sea of leftist comments to get downvoted. Well, Trump said he'd start enforcing laws again, so all the criminals that have had free reign for the last 4 years will soon be in jail. I don't really know what he's talking about there. I mean, aside from the obvious, face value of the comments, but who are the criminals? What free reign have they had? And then Himbo Hank, nice name, like Ross Ulbricht and the J6 mob, those were solid pardons, man. What are you talking about? Ross Ulbricht, that guy's awesome. He invented the Silk Road marketplace. Besides, there was so much FBI corruption in that case. One guy stole a whole bunch of Bitcoin, one of these corrupt DEA agents, and all he did anyway was build a kick-ass online marketplace. He should be supported, lauded for what he did. You know how much drug violence is involved in drug dealing? Well, the Silk Road completely eliminated that, or could have, if the government hadn't shut it down, ruined things like always. And the January 6th mob, Those were ridiculous prosecutions. 22 years in prison for participating in a riot? That's absurd. Don't even get me started on the January 6th political prosecutions. I mean, there was no insurrection. Those people were not trying to overthrow the government. They ran wild through a government building. So what? Black Lives Matters protesters were doing that for years. They were burning police stations. None of them not even went to jail. There weren't even prosecutions. But the January 6th rioters, they ran around in the building for a couple hours and then left, and they were all drawn and quartered in the town square to be flowery in my speech. And then you've got this fear mongering about how, yeah, they're gonna throw the illegals in the prison camps. These guys literally they spend all day daydreaming about how Trump is a fascist. Like that's all they do. And what the hell did any of that have to do with repealing the income tax? They're just ranting about private prisons and slave labor. People can't stay on topic. Okay, finally, a substantive critique. It would repeal the personal income tax and all forms of capital gains tax and basically put a variable sales tax of around 30% on all goods and services. So it would be a tax decrease for the wealthy. Okay, that's not quite accurate. Well, sort of is. Um, the personal income tax is a tax on income, not wealth. Capital gains tax is also a tax on income, although it's a tax on income earned from wealth. So, I mean, it's sort of true that the wealthy tend to have higher income and pay more and be more likely to pay the capital gains tax. But it's a little sloppy to say wealthy. Anyway, I guess it's fine. And I think it's true. Yeah, I think what he's saying is true that it would be a tax increase on the poor, on lower income people, and probably too much so. Like right now, there's sort of like a negative income tax where if you're below a certain amount, you don't pay any taxes and you get a huge amount of transfer payments or subsidies or whatever. So maybe like balancing that a little bit would be good, but this goes too far, I think, is my just the supply side Jesus preaches. Oh God, it's always the same with leftists. They never say anything new or unique. They just repeat each other like a million times over. One thing I like about how they implement the sales tax in Canada is they don't tax groceries. That's a great exception. Of course, in Canada, we've got a sales tax and a high graduated income tax. This is the most extremely regressive form of taxation possible. Oh no! The most regressive form of taxation is a flat tax of like $10,000 a person. That's the most regressive form of taxation. And also the most equal. Everybody pays the same amount. One advantage of a sales tax is you would get like drug dealers who don't pay income tax. You would get at their money. But that's it, really. It's not, there's not, I mean, I'm pretty ambivalent between an income tax or a sales tax. I don't really care either way. I prefer no tax. That's my position. Poor and working people also don't understand how financial assets and investments work. I bet a lot of them do. Should report doesn't mean we're morons. Oh, and then he throws in beaucoup, Mr. Fancy Pants. I know a French word. Pretentious idiot.